So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we think and why it's relevant to good user interface design. So I have 3 courses in my course thread. There were more that could have satisfied it, but these are the ones I'm going to kind of talk about. Probabilistic models of cognition. It's a seminar in psychology, mind and language. More about metaphor and conceptual metaphor than anything else. And user interface design and development, which I just came from, skipped a little bit of to come here. It's a graduate course in user interface design. So this is what you think with. This is your brain. This is actually my brain. It's an fMRI of my brain. Apparently my skull doesn't look too good in the back. But it's made of billions of neurons and glial cells. It's got a lot of this mushy, gushy stuff inside. And this is what you think. This is how you think. You have thoughts, emotions, feelings, experiences, memories, all these weird, fluffy things. So the question is, how do those fit together? How does that make any sense? You have like a mushy, gushy thing on one side and this fluffy thing on the other. So I'm going to attempt to answer that question. A little ambitious, but we'll see what happens. But first I want to talk about how we learn. So computational cognitive science is essentially the junction between mathematics and thought. So it's psychology and mathematics. We make mathematical models that predict how people think. And I've worked in a lab all throughout undergrad, and actually this is the Probabilistic models course. A little bit of what I'm going to talk about, but I worked in a lab, and this is the topic of my honors thesis. So I'll get into that a little bit later. But this is Bayes' theorem. It's a little scary math, but it's not too bad. So essentially what this is saying is that, I'll explain a little better later, but the probability that A occurs given B is equal to the probability of B occurring given A times the probability of A occurring ever. So what this is you have right here, probability of B given A, that's your prior. That's your prior distribution. So a distribution is, just think of it as your belief. It's your belief about how an event will occur, about these 2 events. And then the probability of A is your belief about the likelihood of just A occurring alone. So this is essentially used by my professor religiously to describe pretty much everything. So here's an example. Who's played the telephone game when they were little? Of course, we've all played it. If I say a sentence to somebody right here and then we pass it around and somebody over there says it's going to be completely different. And Bayes' theorem predicts how that changes. So what happens is that you have the data, which is like a little talking bubble. Somebody says a sentence to you, and then you might not have heard all of it. Maybe they were whispering, maybe they were intentionally trying to mess you up. And then you create a hypothesis. What was that sentence actually? What was it? And then you say new data. You say the sentence to the next person. And so that data is dependent on what you actually thought the sentence was, not what the sentence really was, because you didn't hear the whole thing. So this is called iterated learning. It occurs over time, and essentially this is how language is created. This is how you learn concepts, and this is how the telephone game works, and that's the topic of my honors thesis. But what I'm going to say is that this is how we learn pretty much everything. Think about back from when you're a baby. You learn 1 or 2 things about, how to get milk from your mom or something, and that just keeps on compounding through this iterative process. And so it's so ingrained in how to get things from your parents that you automatically know how to do it later on in life, and it's almost unconscious. So the conclusion that we can make right now is that all thought is based on a combination of prior beliefs, which is the prior, and experiences, and immediate perception. So conceptual metaphor, this is the topic of linguistics C105, and it's the idea that it's the idea of understanding one conceptual domain in terms of another. So let's look at this sentence right here. the foundation of the American economy crumbled during the recession. So, we understand what that means. But to understand what it really means, we have to use this metaphor. Economies are buildings. So the way we understand an economy in this scenario is that the economy is a building. So let's think about the mappings. You have economies, usually have different industries associated with them. Farming, tech, you name it. And buildings also have different parts of it. They have steel beams, they have concrete, they have a foundation, which is the most important part of the building, because if the foundation gets messed up, then your building is going to collapse. So what happened in this sentence is that the foundation of the American economy, the industry that is so important to the success and stability of the American economy, is not doing so well. So our economy is at risk of falling down. So we have another one right here. My sister and I are very close. Intimacy is proximity. I'm not going to go into as much detail about this one, but what's profound about conceptual metaphor is that it's all based on physical experience. So when we were children, when we were babies, we had these very, very, very basic experiences. And using what we learned about Bayes' theorem, these experiences kind of compounded over time, and they became a very, very, very huge part of how we think. Intimacy is proximity is directly related to the fact that your mother holds you close when you're a baby. I did a Google search of mother, baby, just those two words, and I couldn't find one picture where the mother was not physically touching the baby. So what's also exciting about conceptual metaphor is it's manifested directly in the brain. So here's where we're going to briefly delve into that little section I talked about earlier about how the mushy stuff meets the fluffy stuff. Computation at the neural level is very basic. So there are neurons that fire when you see just a vertical line or a horizontal line. Just single neurons or single very small groups of neurons. There are also very large systems of neurons, like even whole parts of your brain that fire when you are speaking or listening to language. So that's Broca's area or Wernicke's area. So they've also found that there's simultaneous and relational activation when you're listening to speech, thinking about something, because, and the reason that's relevant is because of conceptual metaphor. You have economies are buildings, so you have these two separate things, and they found that when you're listening to a sentence about buildings or economies using the buildings metaphor, these two areas are activated at the same time. So, like we said before, all thought is based on a combination of prior beliefs, experiences, and immediate perception. Now we also know that complex thought is based on rudimentary perceptions that are manifested in the brain. So why is that relevant to user interface? I thought I was doing a human-centered design talk, not like a neuroscience-y cog-sci talk. Well, let's look at this. What metaphors can we find on this? This is my desktop. I have to clean it up. But just looking at it, we have a bunch of files and folders. So that in itself is a metaphor. These things by no means had to be files and folders. If you remember back to using the terminal, there were no such thing as files and folders. They were just like dropping into directories. But that's also a different metaphor, but we're not going to get into that. So files and folders, that makes a lot of sense. It's a container metaphor. So a container is something that holds other things, usually other like objects. So one other metaphor for a relationship is relationships are containers. So when I say, I don't want to be in this anymore, I don't want to be in this relationship, when I'm saying that to like a girlfriend that I'm breaking up with, sorry, I don't want to be in this anymore, that's a container. And when you say like, I'm in the human-centered design course thread, I'm associating myself with this group, putting myself in this container because I share something, I share a commonality with it. This folder is a container for objects that have something in common. So you're essentially categorizing when you're putting things into these folders. I keep my pictures in one folder, my PowerPoint slides in another. This is container metaphor, and this is why it's so powerful. It's intuitive, and it's based on things that we've learned as children. So this is a project I just worked on, just finished up recently. I actually came from a talk that I gave on it about an hour ago. It's called Discover Vine. It's a social wine discovery website. You essentially go on it to, recommend wines to your friends, find out what your friends like, new wines, the whole shebang. And we use the container metaphor a little bit too. We have this little drag and drop feature that allows you to essentially pick up this wine, physically pick it up, because metaphor is based in physical experience. Physically pick it up and move it to any list that you create. So I have cheap but classy. This doesn't really look cheap but classy. Yeah. Campus Insight, also another one. This is something I worked in, Berkeley Innovation. Cole talked a little bit about that. And we also, so a couple people in here worked on it as well. So this uses a lot higher level metaphor. So Campus Insight is essentially a platform for students to go on and submit their solutions to university-related problems. So you can't really see right here, but there's a question posed bi-weekly or like monthly that says, how should UC deal with the Occupy protesters or some other issue? And students will go on and post their responses and answers. And what they can do is amplify. So they amp it. And that's just initial when you post your response. It's called amping. But also when you upvote, as we know in like social media, a lot of social media sites, when you upvote, you amp. It's not an upvote on this website. It's an amp. So why would we choose amp? Why does amplification make sense? Why does this loudspeaker thing make sense? That's why it makes sense. So Berkeley in the 60s, like the center of revolution, the civil rights movement. These are very, very powerful things, especially for students who are just starting to get a grasp on the way the government is run, the way their school is run, having to deal with issues with money. This is very, very powerful for college students, and they really want to be Mario Savio, this guy right here. It evokes the protest frame. A frame is just like a realm of thinking. So it evokes this idea of protest, but the twist is that, if you go on this website and it has all this protest stuff going on, the idea is that you don't have to actually go and protest and bother the university if you're going to use this website, because you're already protesting. I guess the final conclusion is that good design is intuitive and easy to understand. The way humans understand the world is based on a complex combination of metaphorical mappings that are manifested directly in the brain. These metaphors are learned through physical experiences as infants and are compounded over time through iterated learning. Good design makes use of conceptual metaphor. Go Bears.